He can't come directly to Gettysburg. He has to go around the world. Was it Hanover Junction, maybe? He has to go up through there and then come back down. These Lincoln files, they'll know the exact route. But, and that, if you look at Camp Letterman, you didn't ask this, but if you look at Camp Letterman, when you drive out Highway 30 toward York, if you keep looking, you know the railroad parallels 30 right there. If you keep looking at watching the railroad, right before you get to the giant supermarket, you'll notice a bridge that's still there. Railroads rarely change. You want historical landmarks, railroads rarely move. The Confederates burned that bridge. And so when you think about erecting after the battle Camp Letterman, which was at the giant supermarket, it's on the other side of that bridge, so the railroad could get the railroad train could get there that far. And so unload supplies and load on wounded and ship them out of there. That's why they choose, plus the water, plus the wood, plus the shell. All that combined right there. It's all because of that bridge. Some trivia. See y'all? We're back to midnight. You out there on that railroad bridge at midnight, reminiscing about Matt on a July 1st walk talking about something that has absolutely nothing to do with it. I want you to remember me fondly. I'll read about you the next day in the paper. Tourists killed on railroad bridge opposite Giant. Last words were, "Ranger told me to do it." Park was contacted and asked for a response, and nobody could be found that made the statement. Yeah, looking for firewood. Yeah. All right, now look, guys. Now you can see it a lot better. Gray monument by the gray truck, 76 New York. Bring your eyes to the right. I can't find it behind y'all, but behind, somewhere out there is that black monument, and that's the 56 Pennsylvania. Just keep following the cars right over through here. Car. And basically you've got Cutler's Battle Line, except for the 147th New York. Do I have any New Yorkers here? Here. All right, good to see you. The 147 New York, look at where the rest of the Union battle line is. Now turn around and look right here. Look around you. This is the 147 New York. However many yards that is, you can guess as well as I can. They're out here all by themselves. The nice smiling lady asked me where Hall's battery is right on the other side of that little wood, that little scrub line right there. In that area. Okay. Let me give you the casualties before we move forward. Those two regiments back there, the North Carolinians run them off. The New Yorkers and Pennsylvanians melted away in 15 to 20 minutes. You New Yorkers pay attention to this. In 15 to 20 minutes, out of 27 officers and 348 men in the 76 New York, 18 officers and 151 men were killed and wounded, where that monument is. That's why you put something up. The 56 Pennsylvania in the middle escaped with a loss because they're not getting hit directly, that black monument. They get hit with a loss of 79 men. So that's over twice the casualties because they get flanked. They probably, if this is a tribute to their courage and steadfastness and equanimity. They get flanked and they stay there. Now y'all watch what happens here. We're going to hit 147 New York. While the 76 New York and 56 Pennsylvania are drifting away, 147 New York, as I said, had taken a position right over here by that barn back behind you. After taking position behind the barn, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Miller went in search of orders and 5 minutes later returned with them. He had 380 men from the Empire State, and they deployed these 380 men out here on this knoll behind Hall's battery across the western end of the railroad cut and up the other side. In 1863, a fence existed on the right flank of the 147, somewhere in this general area. If the field was high with grass or crops, this might have made it difficult for the New Yorkers to see the 56th Pennsylvania only a few yards behind them. How long would you say that was to those monuments? In other words, we don't know why the 147th is up here by all the Brigade fighting at the same time. Once you start to deploy 300 and some odd men right here, you look around, you can clearly see, if you were looking, Colonel Miller should have seen where the rest of his support line, but apparently he didn't.
Are they facing a different direction?
No, they're both facing this way.
Oh, okay.
So you got one regiment right here, you got two more back behind you, so they're, you know, in Napoleonic tactics, they're isolated.
They had a second lieutenant, Matt, leading the way.
Okay. Second lieutenant leading the way. I can imagine that y'all in the military get that, right? All right, they've been in the military. As the 147th advanced to the slope, look down here, they could see innumerable, there's a word for you, heads bobbing in the wheat in front of them. These were the men from the 42nd Mississippi. Private Andrew Park of the 42nd recalled, after forming his command, we got two Millers here. I don't mean to confuse you. We got Francis Miller for the New Yorkers, and we got Hugh Miller for the Mississippians. Okay? Colonel Miller walked down the line. How'd you like to have this lecture? And stated that there was a man there who could not stand the smell of gunpowder. He had better step out, for we were going into a fight. To my astonishment, one poor fellow went to him and said, "Colonel, I just cannot go into the fight today, for if I do, I will get wounded or killed." The colonel, with an oath, ordered him back in the line. Just at this moment, this is one of the few sights we have of Joe Davis, maybe the only one I have. Just at this moment, General Davis and staff rode up, so he's in the center of his line at this point, and gave the command to move forward and to let nothing stop us. I should have stated, Andrew Park said, in the beginning that we were thrown into a fine field of wheat as I ever saw. We had not gone more than 300 or 400 yards in this field until we met the enemy's skirmishers. Skirmishers. We drove them in and they fell back over their main line. This drew us up to within 50 to 60 yards. So you gauge it for yourself of that line where they were lying down in the wheat. Now, if you want to be a New Yorker, if you want a reenactment, you'd be laying in this wheat. That's why you have skirmishers out. Can they see the New Yorkers? They can't see them. They may be able to see the flags if they've got them up, but I don't know that. But if not, they're going to be very hard to see. End of quote. Instantly before any return fire could be given, the New Yorkers standing up, the Mississippians' bullets were finding their mark. One New Yorker recalled, quote, men dropped dead and the wounded men went to the rear before they had emptied their muskets. Corporal Fred Rife and a file closer dropped dead, one on top of another, simultaneously. Hit at the same time. Private Park continued from Mississippi, meaning the New Yorkers, quote, they rose up and resting on one knee, fired the first volley, but they shot too high. And but few of our men were hurt. Look at it. This is what the battlefield's teaching you. This man survived, obviously, from the 42nd Mississippi, and the New Yorkers stand up approximately where you are right now, and they shoot. How come they're not hitting those Mississippians? Because they're down there. All right. So what do the bullets do? Go right over their head. You sound kind of green. Maybe they can't see. Okay, the 575 men of the 42nd Mississippi continue to pour in the fire as the 147th New York advanced to the crest of the ridge, a little bit further than we are. The New Yorkers were ordered to lie down in order to avoid the return fire. The battle was now on, wrote a New Yorker, and balls whistled around their head like hail. The men very soon began to fall very fast, and many wounded. Smoke begins to fill the field. Hall's battery over here could not be seen. Captain Gary, Delos Gary, went down with a head wound. Captain Dan Wright of K Company pounded the ground and yelling at the top of his voice at his fellow New Yorkers. He was hollering, "Give them hell, boys, give them hell." Can you picture, can you feel, I should say, the adrenaline going between both sides right now? The right flank now began to bend back. This is the right flank over here. Why are those New Yorkers bending back? They're being flanked by those Mississippians and North Carolinians. All right, so what they do is they conform to the fence back along through there. But there's just not many. There's not enough of them. Okay, with the 76 New York and the 56 Pennsylvania falling back, the full thrust of Davis's men were now being directed on the 147th. They leave first, and then the 147th is stuck out here all by themselves. You see this coming? You see it coming? What's about to happen? You want to be in a bad place on a battlefield. You got North Carolinians. I told you earlier they were wheeling at right angles to come in behind those New Yorkers. Well, guess what? Those North Carolinians just going to come. Now you got Mississippians in front, you got Mississippians on the side, and you basically got a huge regiment of North Carolinians moving in behind you. Now they're not focused on them yet. They're still shooting out with those other two regiments back there. Those men are retreating into that wood line over there. They're still shooting at them. But once they drive them off, they're going to focus on this last piece of resistance that's right up here. Okay, here come the rebels. Here comes Davis. On the 147th left flank, C&G companies, the firing started to wane. The two companies advanced further to the crest. To his left, meaning over here across the railroad cut, Captain Pierce could see skirmishers advancing against Hall's battery. He ordered left oblique. What that means is, if you're firing straight ahead, left oblique means 45 degrees. Those 40 men, 50 men pivot, maybe more than that, 60 men pivot over here, and they start firing at the skirmishers. And the rebels melt back into the wheat. All right, where's the division command? All right, why is he not getting these New Yorkers out of this jam right here? All right, he's probably admiring his statue. He does try to get them out of here. And what you're about to see, what you're about to hear, is about how in a bad situation is about to get worse for these New Yorkers. Wadsworth orders a retreat, and they were sent at the same time that these two right regiments fall back. The messenger delivered the note to the Union Colonel Miller, but before he could say anything, he was wounded, not only wounded, he was shot in the throat. He can't say anything. You can imagine the blood gurgling. I don't know where it hit him, but you can imagine you choke on your own blood on certain occasions. It hits you right. He can't. Is there any worse luck you can have? And his horse, as he's sitting there, pouring blood out, his horse bore him off. The next in command of these New Yorkers, Major George Haney, did not know of the order. Never got the order. So what do the New Yorkers do? They keep on fighting because they don't have any orders to withdraw. Now all three of Davis's regiments are focusing their attention on these New Yorkers. 42nd Mississippi shifts to the left to bear fully on the Union troops. So they're shifting from here over here. As the 2nd Mississippi and 55th North Carolina surge toward the railroad cut, so they're coming in behind him, the cry went up, they're flanking us on the right. Pressure increased on the Federals to hold the position. The 42nd Mississippi now engages in front. The 2nd Mississippi, back behind y'all, is coming from the right flank in the rear. The fight was again fierce and hot, wrote a New Yorker. The boys on the right were falling like autumn leaves. The air was full of lead and men fell all along the line. Lieutenant Pierce of the 147th New York recalled that as the 2nd Mississippi clambered over a rail fence, quote, their colors dropped to the front, that Confederate flag. An officer in front of the center of the 2nd Mississippi, I'd love to know who this is, corrected the alignment as if passing on review. It was the finest exhibition of discipline and drill I ever saw before or since on a battlefield. I don't know who that guy was. He's cool as a cucumber, though. All right, back here, Major Haney faces a dilemma at this point. Fight on against great odds or order a retreat. Wadsworth saves him the trouble. He's somewhere over here. From the McPherson farm, General Wadsworth sent Captain Timothy E. Ellsworth on his horse to deliver the withdrawal message. Can you imagine riding through these fields with these Confederates, these lead flying here, and you're up on a horse through there, and you're a captain, not a 2nd lieutenant. Where'd he go? He didn't like that joke. All right, so Harney turned to his beleaguered command, the New Yorkers, and shouted the unorthodox command. You'll never hear this one again. In retreat, double quick, run. That'll get it done. The Union line melts away. Many Union soldiers have scattered across the railroad cut. Look, folks, this is what the history books can't teach. All right, if I'm a New Yorker and I want to get out of here, I'm not going to run that way. I'm not going to run that way, and I'm not going to run that way. What is my point of least resistance? That way. And that's the way they're going to hit it, naturally, right there. Many were gobbled up by the Mississippians. Of the 380 men carried into the fight, out of the 147 New York, only 75 rallied on Seminary Ridge. 76, a total count for them were 76 killed or mortally wounded, 144 wounded, and between 60 and 70 captured. That is a loss of nearly 76%. Now, a lot of those are captured, but the vast majority of them, right here, this is where New York is going to fall. Now, this is the hardest thing for me as a tour guide ever, is you come out here and I have to try to make this story seem real or alive for you. And I can't do it because I've never experienced it. And most of you have never experienced it. Not all of us. Can you imagine that many New Yorkers slaying out here on this field killed women? I mean, this the loss of humanity. And I mean, that happened in 15 minutes. They shot right where you're standing. Not a marker out here to show anything about it. And that many men, blue-clad soldiers laying here, killed wounded. As the Confederates closed, Hall's guns are starting to withdraw. What we're going to do is I'm going to try to get you an angle. We're going to start making our way over to where our last stop is going to be at the railroad cut. What I'm going to try to do is get over here and see if we can see through this tree line, or at least see over here. So why don't we, anybody walk this field before? What we're going to try to do, let me out front, if our lady to get in the back and beat these weeds down for you. There's nothing better than cut off jeans. I still got an old pair, back when I was 28 inches in the waist right here. I still have an old pair of blue jeans. Hall's guns are up there, y'all. In fact, some of you can probably see the cannons on this end. You can barely see the top of them. That is, if you can see it, behind the trees, that's Reynolds, equestrian statue, and to the right, that gentleman without the horse is Buford, in that area. Now, at the base of Buford, right there, are some tubes, and one of those tubes is one of the few cannons that we have identified on this battlefield. In other words, we know the history of the gun. A lot of guns, the vast majority, we just don't know where they came from or what they did. These guns could have been anywhere. Anywhere. Use your imagination. But that one gun reportedly fired the first artillery shot of the Battle of Gettysburg. Not the first shot, but the first artillery shot. So they identified it. It's got a plaque on it. You won't see it. So anyway, now you see it. They're bridging the gap between the artillery and the infantry. Now look at where the 147 New York is. Now look at where the artillery is. Now look at where the Iron Brigade is. Over here, now you start to see a battle line taking shape. right out here. All right, so 147 New York is driven off this hill, and it's time to go as far as this artillery. How do you remove artillery from the Civil War battlefield? Horses. You have to bring up horses. So conversely, if you want to stop Civil War artillery from moving, shoot the horses, and you immobilize the gun. As the Confederates closed, Hall's guns began to withdraw. Hall could see the 56 and 76 withdrawing behind him, but he did not notice the 147th New York on his right. I have no idea why. The left flank, remember I'm reversing myself, 55th North Carolina and the 2nd Mississippi now began to fill the east side of the railroad cut. In other words, you look behind you where all that crest you see right there, and even over here, you would have had, if you're a New Yorker running through here, you look behind you to see what's coming, you would have seen rebels all the way around you. Mass confusion, yeah, and you're down here in this punch bowl. And what are they doing? They're shooting. Man, I bet you I could beat, what's that guy's name? Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt. That dude better eat his Cheerios. He gonna come out here. Somebody shooting at me. He gonna see this boy rolling on by him. All right. The Confederates shot down the horses as Hall's guns attempted to leave. If I had to say anything, you think something that nobody ever focuses on. You talk about a dangerous job. You shoot a horse is a hard thing to kill. That's a big animal. You know, even with the 58 caliber bullet, a lot of times it doesn't have enough oomph to it to penetrate, to hit the vital organs right there. So anyway, it'll go into a horse. Most of the time, unless it's shot in the head, it doesn't kill it. Now you think about, you got a team of 6 horses, and you pulling these guns off, 1, 2, 3 of them get shot. What's that horse gonna do when it gets shot? It's gonna go buck wild. That sucker's gonna stand up in them reins and start flopping around. If it's badly wounded, it may even go down on you. And then what do you got? You got dead weight right there. What are you gonna do with it? I think a lot of times we underestimate those poor artillerymen. You talk about dangerous job, you talk about bullets, you talk about artillery shells. Trying to get that horse unharnessed from the rest of the team had to be very dangerous, especially when the enemy, the Confederates, are focused on shooting at the horses right here. I think a lot of times, I don't know this, I'm just saying, what would expedite the matter is what they did on the Patton movie, right? Yeah, you shoot them. You shoot your own horses if they're not dead already. You have no time. You have to save that gun. And that flopping horse kicking around, you ain't got time to fool with him. So you finish him off, and then you can get the straps off or cut them out if you have to, and you get that battery moved again. The priority is not the horse. I know. The priority is the gun. You do not want the gun to fall right there. How many horse lovers do I have? Thank you. All right, let's have a group hug. Okay, yeah, have a little cannon on the side. Right there. Look, I'm just telling you what's happening. All right, Hall's guns are trying to get out. And they almost made it, but the whole battery had to stop at a gap in the worm fence along the Chambersburg Pike. They couldn't jump the fence. They all had to go there at once, and guess what? According to one account, a section of guns, that's 2 guns, tried to unlimber on East McPherson Ridge. That's going to be this ridge right over here, you know, between there and the red light, I suppose, today. And the Mississippians and North Carolinians poured it in. The artillerymen dragged one piece off by hand. However, the other one was caught in the act of limbering up. What does limbering mean? That means you're hooking it to the trailer, basically. You're limbering the gun up, which is what the order was. A Mississippi lieutenant, probably a 2nd lieutenant, placed his hand on the cannon while they're limbering it up. If you can imagine your enemy standing right there with you, he places his hand on the cannon and demands the surrender of this artillery piece. Seeing the piece about to move, he again asked for surrender, and this time he cocked his pistol and put it to the driver's head. You can imagine. When the demand was ignored for a third time and the driver dashed off, the lieutenant shot him in the back at point blank range. However, the gun kept rolling. Even though he shot that rider right there. That's how you, I don't know. That's bravery to me. I don't know what I'd do until I was in that situation. I'm not going to say what I'd do or what I want to do. How'd you like to stare down a pistol and still do it? You know what's going to happen to you. I don't know if he got killed or not. Confederates managed to get in among the guns. What do they do when they get near the guns? They start bayoneting the horses. W.B. Murphy of Company A, the 2nd Mississippi, recalled that, quote, "We poured such a deadly fire into them that they left their last piece and ran for their life. The last gun had to be left behind." Hall, the battery commander, later reported it was hellish. Out of the 1,007 men in the 3 regiments of the Union, 515 of those were casualties. That's 50% casualty. Now that includes capture. 2 regimental commanders were down, 1 dead and 1 severely wounded, and Hall's guns were reduced to inoperable pieces from their original battery. All right? Okay, now let's talk about it. If you're a Confederate, let's switch to the Confederate side because we're supposed to be following the Confederates. If you're one of the Mississippians and North Carolinians right now, how are you feeling? Yep. Could it have gone any better? No, you can't get any better. You're having a good time, aren't you? I like that. If you think about it, ladies, it couldn't have gone any better. The Confederates are winning. Win, win, win. What did George Steinbrenner say? No, I got it wrong. I apologize to George, and I apologize to the next man. What did Al Davis say? Just win, baby. That's all you got to do, all right? These Mississippians, these North Carolinians just come out through here, and they're routing them. But you can imagine, look across this field. Can you imagine how hard it was, I doubt they even tried anyway, to keep this line together? You're not having a whole regiment up among these guns. You've got individuals, Mississippians, rushing out there and trying to capture by themselves, is what it sounds like. How many are with them, I couldn't tell them. But my main point is, 2 main points, is right now you are feeling victory. This is what you come to a battlefield for, right? That's why you come here. Okay? Does anybody remember? I don't know why I'm telling you this. Does anybody remember what Conan the Barbarian said was the 3 greatest things in life? Lasagna. To crush your enemies, to have them flee before you, and to hear the lamentations of the women. I don't know why I told you that, but that's what Conan the Barbarian said. Victory. The second thing that happens here, what you've got to understand is, what has victory done to Davis's brigade?
Spread them all out.
Yeah, those beautiful lines that they're marching across through here are now what? Scattered to the wind. You got soldiers all over this field. Okay? And where is Joe Davis? Where's Joe Davis? I'm not saying any brigade commander wouldn't have a hard time. And I'm not saying Joe Davis wasn't here. But we don't have any accounts of Joe Davis coming out here and trying to get control of this situation. And it looks bad. I can't imagine a brigade commander, if he's here, worth his salt. Remember, Davis is inexperienced. You got to give him that. But he's got to get out here and he's got to get control of these men. He's got to get them back in the line. Right now, they don't have them in line. The Iron Brigade has driven Archer's Brigade back, the Confederates back through McPherson's woods. And those Union infantry, the Reston Colors Brigade, which stretches all the way over to the McPherson barn, now has time to do what? Since the Confederates have been pushed back over here, now in turn, just like the Confederates focused on the 147, they're going to turn, they're going to focus on these rebs over here. You see it coming? What's about to happen? All right, let's Let's see what we're doing here. What we got?
Got a question. There's a question.
Yes. We're about to go to it, man. I'm about to take you to it. So there are. Let me answer your question. There's actually 2 railroad cuts. And let me think of my directions here. There's the western cut. You're getting way in the Gettysburg weeds right here. There's the western railroad cut, and then there's the eastern railroad cut. The western one is the one that's more famous. I suppose that they're calling this depression right here, all of this to be like a cut. This is sort of deep, where you see those first little trees right there. That gets a little deep. But where we're going up here by the railroad bridge is where the deepest part is going to be. Okay? So, could I get you, could you turn behind you and walk over there and see if we can get down to those rails? Well, if he doesn't die, we'll be. Who do we think of when we say the name Rufus Dawes? Scott Hardwick. All right. Rufus Dawes and the 6th Wisconsin were placed in tactical reserve as the Iron Brigade charged into Herbst Woods. In other words, 6th Wisconsin not part of Cutler, they're part of Meredith. They're in reserve. They're not in the initial attack, so that is important. The 320 men from Wisconsin are joined by another 100 men from various regiments that they had gathered up that have been the former Brigade Guard. Orders were not long in coming. Directions sent to the 6th Wisconsin said, quote, "Move your regiment at once to the right and go like hell." Many of Davis's men were pursuing the remnants of Cutler's brigade toward town. In other words, these Yankees getting up on down the railroad right through here and through the woods and back over here. Everybody knows about the Chambersburg Pike in that area, and that's what they're focused on. The approach of the 6th Wisconsin coming from this direction toward us halted the Confederate pursuit. What do those Wisconsin men start doing to Davis's men? They start shooting them. They start shooting them down. It's not a trick question, all right? So these Confederates instantly are chasing these Yankees, and they start getting shot at from over here. What is their instant reaction? You turn to face your attacker, don't you? That's natural human inclination. And so they pivot, and they start shooting with the 6th Wisconsin. So what I'm trying to get across to you is this, if you're putting it all together, if you're a Mississippian, North Carolinian on July 1st, where are you going to go? Where is the point where you're going to be the safest? Where you're most likely to live? It's right here in the railroad cut. And so that's the reason they're going to go down in here. It's a natural position. You cannot get killed in here. You know, the bullets just go over your head. Now, it's a pretty good position over here, etc. But right here, it's not very good. In the post-war years, Rufus Dawes recalled the 6th Wisconsin approach. He's talking about being out here on the highway. The regiment halted at the fence along the Cashtown Turnpike, and I gave the order to fire. In the field beyond the turnpike, a long line of yelling Confederates could be seen running forward and firing, and our troops of Cutler's brigade were running back in disorder. And of course he'd say that. The fire of our carefully aimed muskets, resting on fence rails, striking their flank, soon checked the rebels in their headlong pursuit. The rebel line swayed and bent, and suddenly stopped firing, and the men ran into the railroad cut. They're getting down. They disappear. But Dawes doesn't know there's a railroad cut here. This is all post-war. The Mississippians and North Carolinians rushed toward the safest point. Major John Blair. What did I tell you to remember about John Blair? I told you we'd come back to him. He's now in command of the 2nd now that Stone has been shot. He reported, quote, "All the men were jumbled together, meaning here, without regard to regiment or company." Dawes ordered his men over the 2 fences along the highway back there in the face of a withering fire as the Wisconsin boys reformed on the other side of the pike. Help arrived, and this is going in this direction, facing like this. By this time, Archer's brigade had suffered a repulse. We've gone over that, and this freed the 2 units on the right of Meredith. That's the 95th New York and the 14th Brooklyn. to shift north toward Davis's men. Nearly 900 men were now arrayed against the railroad cut. Dawes rushed over to the next unit. This is going to be roughly where the McPherson farm is, roughly along the highway, somewhere in that vicinity. He rushes over to Major Edward Pye, spelled P-Y-E, of the 95th New York, who he perceived as leading the regiment. Rufus Dawes is a man of action. Dawes says to Pye, he says, "We must charge." And Pye responded in true New York fashion, "Charge it is." Yeah, right through there. So let me go over that briefly, so rehash that so you'll make sure you understand what the New Yorkers are doing, 95th and 14th Brooklyn. Okay, let's have a little fun here. Hold that for a minute. Okay, you look like a big New York regiment. Face that way, right over here. Come on, Happy Bob. So, stand beside him, okay? So, all right, so 6th Wisconsin is in reserve, okay? They're laying back here. If you pass stop number 1, they're probably somewhere in the field between the seminary and the tour road. They're laying in defilade in that field. Rufus Dawes receives orders, as I've already said, to go to the right and knock the hell out of the Revs. Dawes is facing this way. He probably forms them up into a column. He advances here, and then he deploys once again at right angles. This is along the Chambersburg Pike. He is now firing at the Mississippians. The Mississippians are pursuing the Yankees. The Yankees are not being caught in droves because they're headed on down the line. But when Dawes and the Wisconsin boys start shooting at them, guess what? The Mississippians rush down in this railroad cut. And what you need to picture is a mob down here. All disconcerted, discombobulated mob. Confederate soldiers right here. And those up here, I imagine some Confederates surely would have tried to climb this darn thing to get up there in order to shoot. It'd be a nice position in order to do that. Don't have any accounts of that, so take it with a grain of salt. But where the line, look how the wall, or the cut, the rock wall begins to get shorter and shorter on both sides. You get over here, you've got a great defensive position. It's a natural trench. Dawes and the 6th Wisconsin, the rehash, are up here shooting it out with these Mississippians. Now Dawes doesn't say this, but if I'm Dawes, I don't know where I am. Okay? These Mississippians just disappear. I don't know where they went. Where did they go? I don't know what happened to them. But they're firing, they're picking off my men. That is when Dawes goes over and he touches, or he communicates with, he literally touches Bob. We'll have a moment, Bob. You want to wave at the camera, Bob? There you go, Bob. Thank you. Thank you. It's Yo Bob. All right, so Bob's on about every video. You just look for Bob, Bob will be there. Bob doesn't say much, but Bob will be on the video. Would you like to say anything for posterity, Bob? All right, so they're facing this way, okay? They're ordered. They're facing toward Archer's Brigade. In other words, they're between the highway and the woods, McPherson's barn and everything. Okay, they pivot. How they get there, I don't know, but they pivot next to the highway. So now we have what? 95th New York, 14th Brooklyn, and now we have the 6th Wisconsin. Now we have 900 men lined up against this railroad cut. Now the attack, I'm about to describe Dawes' attack to you. I don't know if it's worth walking down there because I don't know if you can see out of the railroad cut. So we'll probably just do it here. But Dawes, if you want to understand the Union counterattack, it takes place this way. The 6th Wisconsin is going to be the first to go. They're going to step forward, all right? And then the New Yorkers are going to follow, like in an echelon attack. They don't all charge at once. Was it almost at once? Probably. But they're not all simultaneous as they come through here. They're feeding off each other. You know, they look to the New Yorkers, look to the right, and they're like, cha-ching, we're going forward. And so they follow because they're good soldiers. And they attack. Now, what's the problem for the Confederates down here? This great defensive position is going to turn into what? Trap. It's going to turn into a trap. All right, here's the charge. Thank you, Bob. Okay, in the short time it took to cross the field from the highway to this railroad cut, out of, what did I say they had? 320 men in the 6th Wisconsin?
Yes.
They lost in that field right here in front of us 180 men. Between the red light and this bridge. 180 men in this field. Take out the toll road and you got room for them right there. These Mississippians are not standing here idly, is with the point I'm trying to get across. A few feet from the railroad cut, a fence stood along the embankment. The Wisconsin men quickly threw aside these rails, and 20 men on the far right, meaning down there where the second lieutenant's coming from, right there, are going to go across the railroad cut. You can picture it better than I can describe it, but they're going to form at right angles. What are they doing to the Confederates? They're blocking them in. They're corking the bottle on them right here. So the Rebs can't get out of here. Davis's men were in a trap. Coming up from the rear, Rufus Dawes himself heard his men calling for the rebels to throw down their arms. There is no telling how many. You talk about, well, they didn't have a Geneva Convention or whatever, but you talk about adrenaline. You just lost 180 men out of 320. I'm just putting myself in their shoes. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I don't pass judgment on it, and I don't have any accounts of this. But if I just lost 180 men, what do you think I'm going to do when I get up there? I'm going to get revenge is what I'm going to do. There's no telling how many of them tried to surrender and weren't allowed to as a result. I mean, that's what I'd do. I'd exact something from them. But, you know, in some cases, I wouldn't say every man acted like that. But anyway, they're shooting, they're yelling back and forth, surrender, gunfire going off. Pushing his way to the front, he came upon, Dawes wrote, he came upon, quote, hundreds of rebels whom I looked down upon in the railroad cut, which was where I stood 4 feet deep. So Dawes is approximately right over here in that area. Dawes shouted, "Where's the colonel of this regiment?" I told you, remember this guy. Major Blair of the 2nd Mississippi replied, "Who are you?" And Dawes responded, "I command this regiment. Surrender or I will fire." Without another word, Blair stepped forward and handed his sword to Rufus Dawes. And then Blair, after he had done that, 6 other officers followed suit until Dawes was embarrassed, really, that's quote unquote embarrassed, by the number of swords he was holding, Confederate sabers he was holding right there. Southern infantrymen now began to drop their rifles also. I don't know if you've ever seen the sketch of that. You can look it up, but the Confederates are actually sketched as stacking their arms throughout here in the railroad cut as they're getting ready to surrender. I don't know if they ordered them to or not. Now this is why I stopped here. Simultaneously, 20 or 30 yards to the Confederate right, this somewhere in this vicinity, a struggle began for the possession of the 2nd Mississippi flag. W.B. Murphy of Company A's 2nd Mississippi recalled, "My color guard were all killed or wounded in less than 5 minutes. And also my colors, meaning the Confederate flag, were shot more than a dozen times, and the flagstaff was hit and splintered 2 or 3 times. Just about that time, a squad of soldiers made a rush for my colors, and our men did their duty." What's the color guard's duty? To guard the colors. They were all killed or wounded, meaning the Yankees, but they still rushed for the colors with one of the most deadly struggles that I ever witnessed during any battle in the war. They still kept rushing for my flag, and there were a dozen shot down like sheep in their mad rush for the colors. That's all happening right here in front of you. Over a dozen men fell killed or wounded. And then a large man made a rush for me and the flag. And as I tore the flag from the staff, he took hold of me and the color right here. And the firing was still going on and kept up for several minutes after the flag was ripped from my hands. That big fellow that made the dash was Corporal Francis A. Waller. And he was so big, he stood at 5'7". But I imagine if somebody had a gun, he might as well be 8 foot. How about that? I'll give old Murphy a little bit of leeway right there. Waller sees the colors from Murphy through the flag on the ground. This is where you're standing. Threw the flag on the ground and stood over it, claiming that he stood here with the Confederate flag and reloaded his weapon and fired 3 separate times. Point blank range. I don't know who he's shooting, but, you know, he wants that flag. Let's just say that. He then walked over, after the firing, I imagine everybody's surrendering. He then walks over to Rufus Dawes, okay? And he's still holding the swords, Dawes is, that's been presented to him by surrendering. And Waller takes the 2nd Mississippi Confederate battle flag and he hands it over to Dawes, right there. Pretty cool. Can you imagine the elation of Rufus Dawes? I mean, with the surrender, can you imagine the despondency that's taking place in this trench? From the high that they went to in that field, you know, to the low. I mean, it couldn't have been but a few minutes. Now, this story's cool. Y'all pay attention. I know you're tired, but we almost done. Dawes, in turn, gave the flag to Sergeant William Evans. Evans, from the 6th Wisconsin, had been shot through both thighs. Ooh. You talk about a painful wound. It must not have broke the joint or whatever, because he was still able to walk. But the sergeant took the 2nd Mississippi's Confederate flag and tied it around his waist to staunch the bleeding that was coming out of both legs. Believe it or not, on July 4th, Evans is going to return that flag to Rufus Dawes on Colts Hill. And that's the history of the 2nd Mississippi flag. All right, in conclusion, the fighting had been severe. Around 300 to 340 men, roughly 30% were killed or wounded in the assaulting force. That includes the New Yorkers, if you want to add them to the Wisconsin men. So you're looking 300 to 340. As I said, the 6th Wisconsin suffered the most casualties with 180 men lost. If you include Cutler's brigade, the losses of total killed